Ladies and gentlemen, let's get real for a moment. We live in a time where physical intimacy is no longer sacred for everyone, yet emotional awareness is more vital than ever. So if you're a man who just shared an intimate moment with a woman, this isn't just about what you did in the sheets. It's about what you do after. Because that right there is what defines your character, your maturity, and how she will remember you. Let me be clear, you don't have to be in love. You don't even have to want a future together. Too often, after the intimacy is over, a kind of silence falls. And not the peaceful, comforting kind. It's the kind that stings. The kind that leaves a woman lying there wondering if what just happened meant anything to the person beside her. And it's in this silence that the first and most critical mistake happens. You forget to emotionally acknowledge her. This isn't about performing or faking emotions. It's about being present, about recognizing the simple truth that this woman just opened herself up to you, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, in ways you might not even understand. You might think what just happened was just a physical release, but for her, it may carry more weight, more meaning, or simply more vulnerability. When you finish being intimate with a woman, the worst thing you can do is roll over, look at your phone, close your eyes, or detach as if she wasn't just inches from your skin a moment ago. That silence, that sudden emotional distance, creates confusion, a sense of rejection, and leaves her feeling used. And even if you didn't mean to hurt her, that emotional negligence cuts deeper than you think. So instead of rushing to disconnect, what if you stayed in that moment just a little longer? Not with lust, but with presence. Maybe you pull her close. Maybe you touch her face softly. Breathe with her. Even share a few quiet words that make her feel grounded again. You see, in that moment, her body might be satisfied, but her heart is still open. And that open space is fragile. It's soft. It's where she wonders, does he care about me? Does he see me as more than what just happened? That moment is not the time to go cold. That moment is when real connection is possible, when you lean into it. Just by being warm, attentive, and emotionally present, you become a man she trusts, a man she feels safe with. You don't have to confess love. You don't have to make promises. You simply need to show up as a human being who sees her as one, too. You could say something as simple as, "That felt really close," or "I loved the way you held me." Words like that create emotional closure for her, even if the connection isn't meant to last beyond that moment. Because what you say immediately after sex will echo in her mind far longer than anything you did physically. She will remember, whether you looked her in the eyes, whether you took a moment to still be with her, or whether you turned away and made her feel like a stranger again. This isn't about manipulation. It's not about saying what she wants to hear to keep her around or avoid discomfort. It's about being real, being emotionally intelligent enough to recognize that she is a human being with feelings that may be far more intense than the moment reveals. Even the most confident, empowered women feel vulnerable after sex. It's not a sign of weakness. It's biology. It's psychology. It's energy exchange. And if you miss that, if you overlook that simple truth, you'll always fall short of what it means to be emotionally available. Because being emotionally available doesn't mean committing to a relationship every time you're intimate. It means being responsible with someone else's vulnerability, handling it with care, and not disappearing into silence when they need a whisper of reassurance. When you're finished being physically connected to a woman, you still have the power to emotionally anchor her, to help her feel safe, valued, and held, even if just for a moment longer. That's what real men do. That's what men with depth and presence offer. They don't run from emotion, they meet it. They don't avoid vulnerability, they honor it. And maybe you're not used to that. Maybe you were never taught what emotional presence looks like, especially in intimate moments. Maybe You were told by the world to keep it moving, to act cool, to detach. But real masculinity, real power, isn't found in how fast you can walk away. It's in how present you can stay, even when the room is quiet, even when there are no more games to play, even when there's nothing left but breath and bare skin and the energy of what you just shared. That moment is sacred. That moment is where you get to either build or break trust. And every time you choose to stay a little longer, emotionally and mentally, you teach her that she's safe with you. You teach her that she's not just a moment, but a person you respect. You teach her that you are capable of more than just physical intimacy. You are capable of depth, of warmth, of maturity. And even if this moment never happens again, she will walk away with a kind of peace, a kind of comfort, because you handled her heart as carefully as you handled her body. That is the man women remember. That is the experience women carry with them. So don't underestimate what happens in the seconds, minutes, and quiet moments after the act. That's where your emotional intelligence is tested. That's where your maturity is seen. That's where you decide whether you'll leave her feeling respected or forgotten. And if you can just stay long enough to hold her gaze, speak a kind word, and be present in the softness, you've done something not every man can do. You've turned a physical act into a human connection, and that is what makes all the difference. After intimacy, many men believe the moment has ended simply because the physical act is over. But what truly separates a man of depth from one who merely seeks pleasure is how he chooses to respond in the moments that follow. And this is where the second critical step comes in, checking the emotional temperature, not of her body, but of her comfort, her peace, her well-being. It's a subtle but deeply powerful gesture, one that tells her you care not just about what you did, but how she feels afterward. It shows maturity, it shows awareness, and it shows that you don't just view her as someone who satisfied your desire, but as someone whose emotional state matters to you. A woman may not always say what she's feeling out loud after sex, and sometimes even she doesn't fully know what she needs in that moment, which is why your willingness to ask and listen is everything. It's about leaning in and offering presence, not assuming she's fine just because she didn't speak. Silence can be misleading. Silence doesn't always mean satisfaction, and just because she didn't complain doesn't mean she feels safe or fulfilled, or emotionally okay. When you pause and ask questions like, "Are you okay?" or "Was that good for you?" you're doing something more than checking a box. You're creating emotional safety, and that safety builds trust, even in moments that aren't meant to last forever. It's not about validation, it's about connection. There's a weight that lingers after intimacy, even if both of you went into it with no expectations. And that weight needs to be acknowledged, especially if you care about the experience being remembered as something respectful and shared, rather than selfish and one-sided. Women are often taught to internalize discomfort, to stay quiet, to avoid seeming needy or emotional after sex, and that conditioning can keep her from speaking up, even when something didn't feel right or something left her unsettled. That's why when you take the lead and gently open the space for her to express herself, you do something incredibly powerful. You give her permission to be human. You tell her that she matters beyond the moment, and you prove that you're not afraid of feelings. You're strong enough to handle them. Asking her how she feels isn't weak. It's wise. It's thoughtful. It's attractive. Because while so many men chase physical connection, only a few ever understand that emotional connection is where true influence and power lie. It's where you become unforgettable. It's where she sees that she's not just someone you shared a bed with, but someone you value in that moment of stillness when the world fades and only two people remain. Now, some men might hesitate to ask because they fear the answer. They don't want to hear that she was left unsatisfied or that she didn't feel entirely safe or that something felt off. But growth isn't found in comfort. It's found in those exact moments of discomfort, in those small windows of truth that help you become better, not just for her, but for yourself. If you genuinely want to improve, not just as a lover, but as a person, you have to be willing to hear what's real, not just what makes you feel good. You have to understand that intimacy is a space where ego has no place. It's a space where the heart leads, where sensitivity is strength, and where feedback is a gift. And when you offer that space to a woman, she doesn't just feel heard, she feels honored, she feels valued, she feels safe in your energy. And that safety is something she won't forget. It will stay with her long after the sheets are cold, long after the lights are out. It will shape how she remembers you and whether or not she ever wants to trust you again. This step is not about scripting the perfect response. It's about being fully present and available. It's about giving her the space to breathe, to feel, to process without pressure. Sometimes all it takes is your silence, your stillness, and your attention. You don't need to fix anything. You don't need to have the perfect reply. You just need to care enough to ask and be still enough to listen. You'll be amazed how healing your presence alone can be. It's not the words, it's the sincerity behind them. It's the energy you carry when you ask, and the way you make her feel when she answers. And don't make it mechanical. Don't say the right words just because you heard someone else say them or because you think it makes you look good. She'll feel the difference. She'll know whether your concern is real or rehearsed. Let it be genuine. Let it come from a place inside you that truly respects her experience and wants to understand how it felt for her. And if she shares something uncomfortable, maybe something she didn't like or something that hurt her emotionally, don't get defensive. Don't dismiss it or try to argue it away. That moment is not about your ego. It's about her truth. Hold it. Accept it. Thank her for sharing. That's what builds emotional maturity. That's what builds depth. That's what turns you from just another guy into someone who can be trusted, remembered, and respected. And yes, maybe it's just a one-time connection. Maybe it doesn't lead to anything else. But even if it ends there, you walk away knowing you treated her with the care and dignity she deserved. You walk away knowing you didn't just take, you gave. And giving doesn't always mean flowers and promises. Sometimes it means offering your presence, your curiosity, your willingness to make sure she's truly okay. Sometimes it means being the calm after the storm, the warmth after the fire, the clarity after the high. That's what it means to check her temperature, not just physically, but emotionally. That's what it means to care deeply, even when the moment is brief. And that is something every man who wants to grow must learn. Because without that, no act of intimacy ever truly becomes connection. Once the moment has passed, once the breath steadies and the bodies relax, what you do next is not just a casual decision. It's a reflection of your integrity, your emotional intelligence, and your level of respect for the woman who just shared herself with you. This is where the third and most often ignored act comes in, protecting her peace and guarding your own integrity. In that delicate space after sex, you hold power, not the kind of power that controls or manipulates, but the kind that honors what just took place between two human beings. What many don't realize is that sex is not just an action. It's an exchange of trust, a sharing of presence, a reflection of desire that, once shared, leaves both people emotionally open, whether they admit it or not. And if you walk away from that moment treating it as casual, careless, or worse, as gossip, you not only hurt her, you lower the value of your own character in ways that linger. You must understand this clearly. Discretion is not weakness. Silence is not shame. Privacy is not a burden. It is protection. It is maturity. It is the mark of someone who understands that not everything needs to be shared, especially not with people who had nothing to do with that moment. Bragging about intimacy doesn't elevate your worth. It exposes your insecurity. Talking about her, describing what happened, sharing her name or her body through your words is a betrayal, not just of her, but of yourself. You may think it's harmless or even cool to let your boys in on what happened, but what you're really doing is telling the world that you're incapable of protecting a woman's dignity. And that says more about you than it ever will about her. You become a man she regrets, a man who used her for status, and no woman truly respects a man who seeks validation by reducing her to a story. Protecting her peace also means not playing games. If you're done, say so. If you're not interested in continuing, don't string her along with half replies, vague messages, or emotional distance that forces her to guess where she stands. Clarity is not cruelty, it's kindness. It's the mature thing to do. Be honest, be direct, but be gentle. You don't need to disappear to prove a point. You don't need to ghost her just to make your exit clean. That kind of vanishing act might seem easier in the moment, but it leaves behind confusion, self-doubt, and emotional residue that no one deserves. If you no longer want to continue, you can still leave with grace. You can still leave with respect. You can say, I appreciate what we shared, but I don't see this moving forward, and walk away without damage. That kind of closure may not be fun, but it is freeing. It allows her to reclaim her peace, her pride, and her understanding of what happened without having to dig through silence and mixed signals. And for those who do want to continue something, whether it's a connection, a relationship, or even just honest communication, this is the moment to set that tone. Don't go cold. Don't pretend it didn't matter. Because how you treat her after sex will always matter more than what happened during. You will remember your energy, your words, your level of care far more than the physical details. That's what lingers. That's what shapes the emotional memory. So if you're real, be real. If you care, show it. If you're unsure, say that. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's leadership in its purest form. And it creates an emotional safe space, not just for her, but for you. It allows the both of you to exist in honesty instead of games. Another way to protect her peace is by being mindful of how she processes intimacy differently than you might. Even if she said she was okay with keeping it casual, even if she acted detached, biology and psychology play a role after sex. Hormones shift, emotions rise, thoughts come alive. So while you may be ready to move on like nothing happened, she might still be carrying the emotional aftermath. You don't need to overcompensate or become overly affectionate if you don't feel that way, but you do need to tread carefully. Be mindful of your words, your tone, your silence. Sometimes saying nothing says more than you realize. Sometimes acting like she never mattered is the worst kind of violence, because it makes her question whether she was ever seen, ever valued, or ever respected. You don't have to fake feelings you don't have, but you must respect the ones she might be holding. And finally, protecting her peace means never using that moment against her, never bringing it up to shame her, never throwing it in her face during an argument or a falling out. What happened in private was never meant for public consumption. It was never meant to be a tool you use to hurt her later. If a woman trusts you with her body, she is trusting you with her reputation, her self-picture, her emotional safety. And when you betray that trust, you don't just harm her, you reveal how broken your own integrity truly is. So even if things fall apart, even if the connection fades, even if you never speak again, leave with silence, not slander. Carry the moment with dignity, not disgrace. Because the kind of man who can do that is the kind of man who holds power, not over others, but over himself. This is where true masculinity lives. Not in how many women you've had, not in what you did with them, but in how you leave them feeling when the moment ends. That's the legacy of a real man. One who doesn't just conquer bodies, but honors souls. One who doesn't just take what he wants, but gives what he can. One who protects peace, speaks truth, moves with clarity, and always, always holds on to integrity even when no one is watching. Because real power doesn't need applause. It speaks in the silence. It moves in respect. And it's remembered not in the heat of the act, but in the quiet, careful way you choose to treat her afterward. And that's one final thing